Today's movie exists from 2014. Before I get into the review, spoiler warning. This movie is found footage and focuses on a group of college kids staying at a cabin deep in the woods when, unsurprisingly, Bigfoot shows up. Now, the movie's plot is nothing special. In a lot of ways, it's just a slasher movie with a Sasquatch instead of a guy in a mask. However, the story does deviate from formula in a few interesting ways. One of the biggest surprises when I was watching the film was that the movie gets fully into the action within half an hour of the 80-minute runtime. Given the found footage format, I expected a full hour of the cameraman finding rock piles and bent trees, the main cast hearing strange noises in the night, them finding their stuff being messed with when they wake up and blaming each other, before the last 20 minutes consists of them trying to survive the Bigfoot. Shortening that first part of the formula to the first half hour and stretching out the second part to the last 50 minutes was definitely a subversion of expectations. The film also has something of a twist. In the opener, you're given two facts on screen. I use facts loosely. The first of these facts is that since 1967, there have been 3,000 Bigfoot sightings in the United States. Even though this movie came out in 2014, I still think that's gotta be a low ball. And that Bigfoot experts say Bigfoot are only dangerous towards humans if they're provoked, which I also don't believe to be true. My disagreements aside, the second claim is what ultimately sets the plot into motion. In the beginning of the movie, you see the main characters actually hitting something with their car, which you're led to believe is the Bigfoot that will be the film's antagonist, and that antagonist's reason for antagonizing. However, towards the end of the movie, it's revealed that what they hit was actually the Bigfoot's child, and that the rampage throughout the film has been the Bigfoot seeking revenge. The last scene of the film is the Bigfoot advancing towards the final surviving character, and then just letting him go. The main character expresses contrition after realizing that what they hit was the Sasquatch's child, but it's actually left ambiguous as to why the Bigfoot lets him go. It could be because the creature now understands that they didn't mean to hit the young one. It could be because the Bigfoot realized that revenge wouldn't bring its child back. Could be that the Sasquatch feels that letting him live with all of his friends dead would actually be a worse fate than death. Or it could just be that after being shot multiple times throughout the course of the film, the Bigfoot simply doesn't have the energy left to keep going after him. The ambiguous closing scene definitely gives the creature a lot more depth and makes it more than just a big, hairy, howling monster. And portraying Bigfoots as unique individuals with intelligence that's at least somewhat comparable to humans certainly lines up with what I've seen reported over my years of research. The film is found footage, which feels like a good idea for a Bigfoot movie. After all, who's more synonymous with blurry shaky cam than the American Ape Man? The problem is that the movie never feels like it had any real reason to be found footage. Beyond one scene where one of the characters says he wants to shoot a YouTube video, there's never an explanation for why he's filming everything. In fact, there are multiple scenes and shots throughout the movie that couldn't have been found footage. Where they came from within the story is never really explained. Maybe only certain parts are supposed to be found footage and the other parts are just showing us what's happening like a regular movie would. But to me, it just ended up being a bit of a confusing mess. However, what's even more egregious, in my opinion, is that the cameraman keeps filming during parts where they're in so much danger that it causes me to seriously question his sense of self-preservation. Now, truth be told, I might find myself having more guts than brains if I were in a dangerous situation where I could capture Bigfoot footage, but this guy whips his camera out where they're actively being attacked. At one point they're hiding out overnight in the woods, yet he still keeps filming. I mean, read the room, or read the forest, I guess. After watching the film, I really don't see why the creators felt the need to make it found footage instead of just shooting it like a traditional movie. The best explanation I can think of for why the movie is found footage is that the man responsible for creating Exist's story as well as directing the film is a guy named Eduardo Sanchez. Eduardo Sanchez was also the co-writer and co-director of another found footage movie you may have heard of. It's called The Blair Witch Project. And in all fairness, if I made a found footage flick for under $1 million, and it made $250 million at the box office, became a pop culture phenomenon, and spawned an entire genre of horror movie in the process, well, yeah, I'd probably end up sticking with the format too. The scene that I have the biggest problem with is one that actually started off very strong in my opinion. During the first night, the Bigfoot completely destroys the car that the main characters arrived in. I actually really liked this part. The car being unable to be used is a pretty classic horror movie trope, but having the monster completely wreck the vehicle by itself places Bigfoot a step or two above your typical slasher villain. Since their phones aren't getting reception, again, typical slasher trope, the protagonists decide to have one of them, Matt, take a shortcut through the woods to see if he can reach a location from where he can call for help. Again, I liked this idea because it took a typical slasher trope, and the protagonist found a workaround instead of just acting like your typical idiot slasher movie victims. However, where it falls apart is when that scene actually has to happen. You see Matt riding his bike, inexplicably recording with a helmet camera, because remember, this movie is found footage, when Bigfoot appears and attacks. The Bigfoot sprints into the bike rider and hits him once. He then struggles and starts limping away, before the Bigfoot hits him again. The character is later shown to be alive in the Bigfoot's lair, after the creature dragged him there for reasons that are never explained. Now, there are some reports of Bigfoot attacks out there. There aren't any where people actually get hit by the creatures. There's a reason for that. If there are people out there who have been physically attacked by a Sasquatch, the only way we're getting that story is with a Ouija board. But this guy just tanks a full force charge, and then another hit, and survives. Honestly, why is Matt even bothering with going to college? He should be fighting in the UFC if he can survive all this. Afterwards, there is a scene the next day where that character's friends see that the Bigfoot has returned his mangled bicycle, making it clear to them what happened. Now personally, I think that less is usually more when it comes to horror, and that your imagination will always be scarier than anything that they can put on screen, so maybe you'll disagree. But wouldn't that part of the movie be more effective if they didn't show the Bigfoot attack? If they showed Matt setting off on his bike, then focused on his friends back at the cabin, and in the morning, it had them find the returned bike? On the day that Matt leaves, the cabin is attacked by Bigfoot that night. The audience could see this as something of a hope spot, that the Bigfoot is busy attacking the cabin while Matt safely gets away to call for help, only for that hope to be dashed in the morning when they see his wrecked bike in front of the cabin. Maybe you feel differently, but I can't help but feel that that would have worked better than the scene of the $6 million Matt surviving being attacked by Bigfoot. As far as the Bigfoot itself goes, I think the suit is a really good one, to the point where I've even seen some, shall we say, less than discerning Bigfoot social media pages post stills from the movie, saying that they're potential photographs of the American ape man. In both appearance and actions, the film's Bigfoot seems to be closer to what you would call a Type 4 Bigfoot, more similar to a Neanderthal than the gorilla-esque Patty type. The figure is on the smaller side for a Bigfoot, but that's understandable. The guy in the suit is 6'7", and how many actors are there that are both bigger than that and can do all of the stunts? Although I do have to say, there are a few points where I think they should have tried to use more camera tricks to make the figure seem larger. The monster does look pretty scary, and like I said earlier, gets more depth than you would expect in a Bigfoot creature feature. Despite more than half of the movie focusing on the monster's attacks on the main characters, it never ends up feeling overexposed, and its threat never feels diminished until the very end, when it willingly decides to stop pursuing the last surviving main character. However, introducing the monster so early also causes the film's biggest problem. That problem being that the movie never makes you care about what happens to the characters in it. Without having more time to develop these characters and their relationships with each other, it's a lot harder to get invested in whether or not they survive, since they're basically just strangers that are never given anything in the way of characterization. It's definitely the type of film where you just wait to see how people die, rather than caring whether or not they die. Maybe I'm just callous, but there wasn't a single person I was rooting for the survival of by the time Bigfoot showed up, which was only half an hour in. And if you don't care about the characters in a film, there's no tension. If a movie doesn't have tension, it's going to have a hard time being actually scary, which is a really big problem for a horror movie. A good suit and nuanced interpretation of Bigfoot, but weak, underdeveloped characters and lack of logic when it comes to the movie's found footage nature means that Exists gets 3 Bigfoot tracks out of 5.